Hello, listeners, and welcome back to another episode of the Ballet Piano Podcast In Conversation With. I'm Chris Hobson, and as always, I'm joined by Mr. Matthew Gregory.
Hello, listeners.
My wife, Akiko Hobson.
Hello.
And this week, we are very proud, pleased, and privileged to be joined by Mr. James Barton. Hello, James.
Hello.
Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
It's so nice. I mean, you're very busy at the moment, so it's amazing that you could squeeze us in.
Anything for you, Matthew.
We're so grateful. How's it going?
It's going.
You had a busy day yesterday, didn't you?
Very busy day. Scottish Ballet have been incredibly proactive actually during this time, obviously because we haven't been able to do live performances. We've just been putting a lot of stuff out digitally. So we're making a film at the minute, which has been crazy, but also amazing. Yeah, I've never worked on a film set before, let alone assisted.
Where are you filming
one.
it?
We're filming it in Tramway, which is kind of like the theatre underneath Scottish Ballet.
Right, near the studios,
Yeah. Massive crew, amazing catering van on about half a stone.
Catering on films is always plentiful.
It's like the downfall of everybody. And just learning sort of all the lingo of a film crew is very different. What I really love is when we're kind of rehearsing and I'll say to the dancers, okay, just mark it. But mark it in film is when they do the clipper thing. Mark it.
Yeah, to get everyone in sync.
Yeah, sometimes things get a little bit lost in translation. But it's been amazing. I've really loved it.
Yeah.
And I hope it's going to look really great. I can't wait to see what they come up with. We've got another week of filming left.
Yeah.
So it'll be good.
Oh,
it's incredible.
And we were just saying as well before we started this record that you're from Liverpool. That's near me, the Wirral. Yeah, I'm from the Northwest. Chris is from Manchester.
So we're all Northwesters in here, apart from Akiko.
All Northerners. Yeah.
I'm East.
Well, it's like we've lost David, haven't we? But he's from Liverpool.
He's
originally.
from Liverpool, yeah.
Is he? David from Liverpool.
You really
St.
can't
Helens.
tell by talking. St. Helens, sorry,
Yeah, all same area as me. Exactly the same.
Did not know that.
Yeah. And where did it all begin for you?
Okay.
And you said you moved to Surrey, didn't you?
Well,
really early.
My parents moved to Lincolnshire.
Okay.
So, I kind of think of that as where I grew up.
Yeah.
I had a bit of a Billy Elliot story, really, in terms of my sister went to ballet.
Yeah.
She's 18 months older than me. And I got dragged along to kind of a local school show that they were doing. And I was 3 and I just turned to my mum and said, I want to do that.
Yeah.
And she said, and she always gets annoyed when I tell this story because it's not a bad thing, but we didn't come from a showbiz family. Boys on the Wirral did not do ballet.
That's what David said, yeah.
So her response to me was she turned and she said, oh, no, you don't want to do that. Ballet's for girls. And I said, no, really, I do. But by the way, my mum doesn't have that broad of an accent. I just like to do it just for dramatic effect.
On the podcast she does it. She probably won't listen to it.
I won't tell her. And I said, no, really, I do. And she said, okay, you can try it, but you'll do it for three weeks and then you'll give it up. And here I am, years later, having made a career out of it. And I just absolutely loved it. I slept in my ballet shoes. My mum still got them, this first little pair of leather ballet shoes. I used to do the painting. My dad was painting the house and I used to help him with the painting, still wearing these leather black ballet shoes.
Wow.
But now your mum must be proud of you, no?
Oh, of course. Both of them are massively.
Yeah.
Did you tell at some point, I want to be a ballet dancer?
I don't even think I knew that was a thing, really.
Yes.
So my grandma loved ballet. She'd sort of seen Alicia Markova dance and all of that stuff. So she was quite into it. So when I started ballet lessons, she used to give me sort of VHS videos of, Nureyev and the Royal Ballet and all of that stuff. So I would watch it. But I think, when you're that young, you don't know that it's a thing that you can kind of be a ballet dancer.
Yeah.
So I went to a really good teacher where we lived. And when I was about 8, she said, listen, there's this thing called JAs of the Royal Ballet School.
Yeah.
And I think James should audition. So I went along, didn't know anything about it really, sort of did that. And I became a JA. And then it all kind of just went in stages, really. We
Yeah.
didn't pre-plan anything.
Once you're in these associate programs, the Royal Ballet, they that's when they can take note of you, can't they?
Yeah, and you kind of just go with it.
Yeah.
Yeah, so like a snowball just keeps going, doesn't it? You just end up going down this path, but you don't realise until you've been, you're halfway down it or whatever, or you take your next sort of turn and
absolutely,
training
and everyone else is kind of doing it, so you just go along with what they're doing.
Yeah. And did you sort of realise that you were talented enough to do it? Because you have to be talented to do those associate programs.
Yeah.
And did you have to audition for it?
Yeah, I remember skipping along the room in a pair of Speedos. It was really weird. And then just getting a letter saying, oh, he's got in. So I used to go just once a month to Birmingham.
Yeah.
And I remember finding it quite dull, if I'm honest. We had to just sit on the floor and sort of do metatarsal exercises.
Yeah. Money well spent.
Yeah, I found it. I was definitely... The thing I loved about dancing was music and dancing to music. And I just found it all very static and quite regimented.
It's quite long, isn't it, class, for the small children? I used to play for JNMA and things, but it's long. It's like 2 hours and a quarter.
Wow.
Yeah, it's quite intense.
Yeah.
But I do remember I sort of at Christmas time, Birmingham Royal Ballet were looking for kids for their production
For the Nutcrackers.
and they used the Birmingham JA children.
Oh, yes.
And then I did that and thinking, oh, this is worth it now because I'm performing, not just sort of doing the exercises, which I was never a fan of.
Yeah. So that's quite a good learning lesson though when you're young, isn't it? They're preparing you for that. If you put the hard work in, the rewards are going to come afterwards.
Yeah,
so you sort of learn that without
absolutely.
realising almost at the time.
Yeah, and now looking back on it, the discipline of it was probably quite good.
Yeah.
Definitely. And just to be surrounded in a class with so many other boys, I wasn't used to that. So that was definitely a bonus
David
as well.
said the same thing, didn't he? He was like, I think he said, I don't know what it's like in your school, but David's in conversation said, I was there and there was one other boy who was dancing. He said, then when he went to the Royal Ballet School, he's like, wow, other boys do this. It's not a lie sort of thing.
There wasn't even one other boy. And I was the only one. And I can't say that it really bothered me. And I probably didn't even notice until I got to JAs and then until I went away to ballet school and I was like, oh, this is what it should be like,
Yeah, and I was doing my research on you.
Go on then.
Yeah. And you got a place at the Royal Ballet School, White Lodge.
I did at 11.
Yes. And then you chose to go to Elmhurst.
I did. So
Really?
yeah. So
There's a lot on the internet about you, James.
Is there?
There's a lot.
All bad, I hope.
No, I was really getting to know you all over again.
Yes.
So from JAs, you presumably just said, oh, well, let's go to audition for the school.
Well, you did. I think we did. The first audition for White Lodge was held in Birmingham. And all the London lot came down and sort of the first round was just basically on another JA session on a Saturday.
Yeah.
And then the second one, the final recall, was at White Lodge. And I remember my JA teacher saying to me at the time, because you had to fill in all these forms of how tall your parents were, how tall your grandparents were, and so that they could try and predict, what you were going to grow into.
How long their necks were.
How long their necks were, how big their feet were. Yeah, all of that stuff.
Yeah.
And I remember my JA teacher saying, because of his height and his proportions, he may get assessed out. And to my parents, coming from a non-theatrical background, that sort of rang alarm bells.
Yeah.
And I can't say it really bothered me, but I went to White Lodge to audition, and because we'd been told about this assessing out thing, my parents, being who they are, said, well, we should have a backup plan. So we went to Elmhurst, which was just down the road in Surrey at the time, and I just loved it. I loved that audition day. You had to do a jazz solo. You had to do, and a ballet class. And I'd done everything.
Yeah.
Ballet, tap, jazz, all of it. So I didn't really see why at the age of 11, I was being told I just had to do one thing.
Yeah.
And I just loved the environment. It was slightly smaller. The year groups were a little bit smaller. It seemed less intimidating.
Yeah.
I loved the staff. I thought it was really friendly. And so when I got offered my place at White Lodge, I remember my parents saying to me, well, what do you want to do? And I was like, I want to go to Elmhurst because it just felt like the right thing to do.
I love that.
That's cool.
That's really rock star.
And actually, there were 3 people in my year at Elmhurst that had been offered places at White Lodge. Another boy and another one of the girls. And we'd all been offered White Lodge, but went to Elmhurst instead.
Oh, wow.
Gosh, how cool is that? And so you did your schooling there, 5 happy years.
5 happy years, yeah. 6, actually.
6.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I loved it. I still keep in touch with a lot of my teachers. We still talk regularly. And then
is that where Andrew Wilson taught you?
Andrew Wilson was there for my first 3 years. Yeah. And then Bill Glassman took over.
Oh, yes.
And Elfrida Thorogood ran it, who was obviously ex-principal of the Royal Ballet. So, it felt the same, but it was much more personal. I felt like they really nurtured me as kind of a performer, but on a personal level and as a person. And I just loved it. I've got really happy memories of
That's
schooling.
so lovely.
Because lots of people don't actually talking to them. They're quite sort of jaded and a little bit bitter about the whole school thing.
Yeah.
I'm the opposite. I loved it.
That's wicked.
I trained in everything.
You did. You do everything there, don't you?
Yeah.
School performances every year.
Yeah. Jazz, chat. We had drama lessons. We had private singing lessons. There was a choir,
Wow.
I loved it. I really did.
Did you do any company work when you're at school?
Yeah, I did. Lots of stuff with ENB because obviously Elfrida Thorogood was married to David Wall.
Yeah.
Who was at the time ballet master at English National. So we would all get shipped up. I think in the first year that I was at Elmhurst, I did Nutcracker at Christmas, then a tour of Romeo and Juliet, and then Swan Lake at the Albert Hall in the summer.
Yeah.
And then on top of that, I did the Elmhurst performances. So to me, it just felt,
So you were on stage really young.
Yeah, lots of
good CV for your first year.
It really is.
Good starting block.
It was great.
You probably wouldn't get that at White Lodge, being totally associated with the company.
Yeah,
just doing their
not.
performances.
Probably not, and there would have been sort of a smaller group of people, sort of pool of people doing it. I mean, I don't know, but yeah, I felt very lucky to be doing all of that, and it was so fun, It really was.
And so, when did you leave Elmhurst then?
So I did.
I mean, I was reading last night.
Yeah.
16.
Well, no, the school closed in Camberley and moved to Birmingham. In what I think it was 2004.
Right.
At the risk of toot my own horn.
Yeah.
I got moved up a year. So I did my GCSEs.
You toot away.
At 16. And so then I'm, you're supposed to do 3 years of upper school.
Yeah.
And I jumped the first year and went straight to second year. Because I remember Elfrida and a lot of the staff just sort of saying like, you're kind of cooked, I think you're only really going to start going to the next level by working.
Yeah.
But obviously at 16, that's young. So
Yeah.
they moved me up a year. And I did AS and A-level all in 1 year, but I chose a really, really awful subject. So it was like office skills.
Which now you're probably into 2020, you probably need the office skills.
I probably did, but I think I barely turned up to the lessons. So I'm a bit of a technophobe. And I did an A-level in dance, which, I was dancing all day anyway.
Yeah.
And so, I did 1 year and then the school moved to Birmingham, and I did literally I remember doing 5 weeks of the new school, and then they brought me in to do stuff with the company. I was not there very long, and then I joined BRB.
So sort of 17, you were sort of working in the company.
As a student, and I was working with them a lot.
Yes.
I was barely at school.
So were you called a ballet or apprentice, or was there
there wasn't really a name for it. You were just sort of a student who did just general dog's body, I think.
Yeah.
Called in to learn stuff last minute, and then there was one particular time where the company were doing Hobson's Choice. And I remember Mary Goodhue, who had taken over the school in Birmingham, coming in and sort of saying, the company needs you. And this was at 10 o'clock in the morning. So I went over And Desmond Kelly said to me, "How quickly can you learn a 3-act ballet?"
Oh, I like that voice.
Desmond's voice
His
as well
voice.
is it's like silk, isn't it? It's on your ears.
And of course, you know, I was a student, so I just went like that and stuff.
Oh, no, you said
So precocious.
so obnoxious. And I went into a studio with Dennis Bonner, who's the notator there.
Were you panicking a bit?
I don't even think I thought. I think I was just like, right, tell me what I need to do.
Yeah.
And so I learnt the whole thing. I did the dress rehearsal that afternoon, did the opening night that evening.
Oh my word.
And then 2 days later, David Bintley gave me my job because I think he was like, "Oh, we just can't get rid of him." You know, I'd been working there as a student so much, and then I think I'd kind of proved myself.
But that's
quick.
you just did the best audition ever to get a job.
Yeah. So that's how that kind of happened.
That is so rock star.
Yes.
Really, it's not.
It really
That's
is.
cool.
That's amazing.
So that's how that happened. Yeah.
Gosh. And so you were BRB for a long time, up to soloist.
Yeah. I mean, now I look back on it, it didn't feel that long. You know, it was 14 years, but then I took the year out.
We'll talk about that.
We'll talk about that. Yeah, 14 years. But then I still kind of feel like I stopped dancing quite early. You know, I was sort of only very early 30s when I stopped. I kind of could have gone for a bit longer, but yeah, 14 years.
Wow. But BRB as well used to have the most incredible, not only repertoire, but touring schedules, didn't they, across the UK and the world throughout that period. It was huge.
Because they are the touring company of the Royal Ballet,
The
essentially.
touring trash.
Yeah.
No.
No, we used to call ourselves that. It's totally fine.
Really?
Yeah, we love it. The touring
Really?
trash. Absolutely.
Aw.
We used to have a similar name for us up at Northern Ballet, but I won't say what it is on the podcast because it's
Okay.
wildly offensive.
Tell me afterwards.
Tell you afterwards.
Yeah.
There's not enough beeps on the machine for that one.
Do you get tired touring around?
I think you just kind of got used to it. And touring changed so much over the time that I was sort of in the company. You know, when I first joined, there would be 3 of you in a Travelodge room because you kind of got your per diem and whatever, and you just tried to save money. You can make money on that. But by the time I left, you know, they'd booked it all for you, and you kind of, you know,
and
was
you get
one
the coaches
person.
put on for you and everything, don't you, from BRB? And if you don't take it, then you pay for your own travel and things.
All of that. Whereas when I first joined, it was, you know, 5 people in a car driving up to Sunderland.
Sharing the petrol, saving the money.
Yeah, all of that. Stopping at the service stations. Yeah, it was all of that. So it changed quite a lot. No, I probably did find it tiring towards the end. But just because I was like, oh, here we go again.
Yeah.
But no,
when you're young,
it was
same
a
in
blast.
musical
It's the
theatre.
excitement,
It's
isn't
a
it?
blast going
Yeah.
on tour, living out of a case. I was just saying the last time I was here in this, where we are, you know, it's about over 10 years ago. You're just young, and when you're when you're touring when you're young, it is a blast.
Yeah,
Oh, it's like a
absolutely.
school trip, isn't it?
Yeah.
And you're with all your mates.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know, most of them are mates.
Yeah. You can't like everybody.
You're being paid to perform. And it also, touring breaks up the monotony of being in the same place.
Yeah.
You know? There were times when I would be like, oh, good, we're back out on the road now, you know.
Different theatres.
Yeah, and you went to places, and I mentioned Plymouth. I've got such fond memories of going down there. The theatre staff was so lovely.
Yeah.
You know, and again, places like the Lowry in Manchester.
I love the
The
Lowry.
Lowry's lovely, isn't
Dead
it?
friendly people. And they were always there whenever you got back. And it was, I enjoyed it.
I mean, slightly going off topic, but Plymouth had a rough ride during this pandemic. And because it's one of those theatres that's a full production house, lots of new musicals will open there because they've got all the wardrobe and the set building. It all happens at Plymouth.
Yeah,
and
it
they
broke my
obviously
heart,
struggled through. Is it closed?
No, but they made a lot of their staff redundant.
Yeah,
so,
yeah.
You know, if you went back now, it would probably be quite a different place.
Yeah,
Because the
it's
Lowry
really
turned into a
sad.
court at one point.
Did
so
it?
for I think for about 2 or 3 months through the back end of the pandemic, because there was such a delay in the British court system of getting people through it. They took the small theatre, so not the big theatre where BRB used to perform, but the smaller one,
Lyric
at the back,
Theatre,
yeah,
and turned it into a sitting court.
I saw that. I
months,
saw the pictures of it.
just to sort of keep afloat and get some money through the doors.
Yeah, all those regional theatres. But it came out yesterday. I think a lot of places have now got quite a big chunk of money from the relief
I just saw
funds.
that as well.
Fingers crossed they all make it through.
Yeah.
If you're enjoying this episode, then why not visit the website balletpianopodcast.com and join the mailing list. You can access past episodes, transcripts, music playlists, and so much more. It will ensure you never miss new episodes or updates. That's balletpianopodcast.com.
So how quickly were you promoted at BRB?
You know what? Not that quickly.
Right. I have
to say, I earned my stripes.
Yeah.
Or I feel like I did. So, I did 5 years in the Corps de Ballet, or as an artist. But when I think back to what I'd done as an artist before I got promoted to first artist, it was quite a big chunk of soloist and actually even some kind of principal roles. Which is now kind of 10 years on. When someone in the Corps de Ballet does one role and then they're just like gunning for that promotion, I'm like, You know, also though, I do think in hindsight, I did a lot of those roles. And one thing that David Bintley was amazing at was he kind of allowed you to go out and not make mistakes, because obviously you didn't try to make mistakes, but you had to go out and just do it. And learn your craft. And the best way to learn is to get out there and just
So there was lots of sort of living on the edge in roles.
And kind of just like, I'm not quite sure I'm totally ready for this. But they pushed you to do it anyway. And you kind of did do the Wednesday matinee in Sunderland. But, you know, the more you did them, the more you learn and the more experience you got.
You got a Saturday night out of it.
And then you got a Saturday night promotion out of it. So I did 5 years, and then it all happened quite quickly. Actually, I did 1 year at first artist, and then went to soloist after that. Quickly. So I didn't wait for very long at first artist, which was nice.
What's this? I wrote when I was reading about it. I wrote all this. This Dame Gillian Lynne. Miracle of the Gorbals.
Miracle in the Gorbals. And the irony is now I live right next to the Gorbals.
Well, yes, it's about it's about Glasgow, isn't it?
Yeah, it is.
And when was that? That was revived just not that long ago.
It was 2014, maybe 15.
See, that does feel like quite a while ago.
Yeah.
But I remember when it all happened.
Yeah. So that was, I will honestly say, hand on heart, that
fond
was
memories.
One of the highlights of my time. So if I can be really transparent, now looking back, the piece was not great. It was very dated.
Right.
But there were kind of 6 main characters, and what we learned and what she gave us from that experience, you know, she taught us how to act through dance, really. And in a natural sort of more organic way. I don't always like using the word organic. But
I know what you mean.
She forced you. She really did bridge the gap between musical theatre, straight theatre, and ballet. You know, I remember the first day of rehearsal with her, she made you walk one by one across the room in character. Well, ballet dancers don't do that. We say, I love, you love, we love, die. And so she would, and then she would give you feedback on it. She's saying, well, no, you know, what would your walk be like? So you started with walk and then you built it from there. And she was such a perfectionist. And she really made you think outside the box. And I just loved her as well as.
And so if she died last year before.
18.
And she was 18 and she was 92, 93.
Yeah, 92.
So she would have been obviously late 80s.
Yeah, she was. She
was
89.
Still sharp as anything.
I've got pictures of her lying on the floor with her leg up by her head. She would do full warm up every morning.
She was doing ballet class every day, wasn't she?
Yeah.
Wow.
She was just her energy and just zest for the whole thing.
Yeah.
She was incredible.
Really.
We had the privilege of working with her. She revived Simple Man for Northern Ballet.
Of course,
That was back in 2009. And having her in the studio for about 4 weeks, it was incredible because she was brilliant and you never knew what she was going to come out with.
Yeah.
Every, lady was in her late 70s or very early 80s when I first worked with her then. It was incredible, to hear this lady talking about, ladies, everything comes from the nipples. Use your nipples.
Fire the nipples.
Well, and to that, I'll just to add on to that, when I was working at Birds, one of the graduations, she did the keynote speech at graduation, to the graduates, and all the staff are in 2 rows on the chair, behind the lectern, and the speaker is given the lectern to speak into with a microphone, with any notes or whatever. She literally walked from behind the lectern to the front of the stage, and all the graduates are in the stalls, and she looked them all in the eye and told them exactly what they needed to do in their careers. No microphone, her own voice, shooting from the nipples.
Yes.
And it was the most inspirational, and all the staff are just like open mouth, like, wow, there's nothing twee about this. This is so direct. Yeah,
she
force,
was
man.
I know it said a lot, but they do not make them like Gillian anymore, because she was
they can't,
incredible.
Can they?
No, she was just of an era, and she'd done so much at a time when people weren't doing it. She was crafted a whole new way, like you say, of directing dance and putting pieces together, didn't she? Choreography.
And she was a woman, and she was ballsy.
Yeah.
And she told a lot of men what they should be doing. And I think at that time there were very, very few women doing that. But then she came from Ninette de Valois, who was another very strong woman. And what was really lovely is I went to her sort of memorial or funeral. It was very showbiz. You basically got a program, and Michael Ball stood up.
Is this at Piccadilly, St James?
It was.
On Piccadilly,
And Michael Ball stood up and sang "Love Changes Everything."
Yes.
Patricia Routledge did a reading. And it was all very like the who's who. But it was just amazing to be there, and everybody shared kind of the same story and the same affection for her, and how many people she'd really influenced, and that's an amazing legacy to have, I think.
Yeah, and she was probably, even 30 years ago in the 80s, one of the few female choreographers in a man's world.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Always on creative teams with lots of other men and no other women, totally holding her own.
Absolutely.
Incredible.
And paving the way for other women to do it.
Which
is so important.
Yeah.
It's like one of the old interviews when she'd done a film with Errol Flynn, and he said, "Oh yeah, so you slept with Errol Flynn?" She said, "Yes, but we all did."
She was so transparent about stuff like that. I loved it. Breath of fresh
It
air.
made for a lot of fun in the studios.
Yeah, absolutely.
Let's talk about An American in Paris.
Oh, yes.
How
that old chestnut.
How did that even
come about? So I had been at Birmingham at that point for about 11 years.
What year? I can't even remember what year now.
2016.
Yeah.
I was doing the Benesch notation course at the time.
Okay.
And absolutely hating it. No disrespect to any Benesch notators out there, but I tell you why I was hating it is because I was so bad at it. Everybody, all the management at Birmingham kept saying, "You should do the notation course." And I was like, okay, I'll give it a go. And they gave me they didn't give me an office. I assigned myself an office. And I used to do this homework, and it was just so tedious. And I remember saying to David Bintley, I feel very stale. I've been here 11 years, and
I've been put out to pasture.
A little bit,
yeah.
And I was like, I've lost sort of direction. And then I was getting coaching by the DCD, the Dancers Career Development, and this incredible woman, Isabel Mortimer, and she sort of said, well, you know what, James, if you want a change of direction, and it's clearly not being a Benesch notator, put it out there into the world. You just have to sort of be open to things. And literally a week later, no word of a lie, I was sitting in a stage call in the Birmingham Hippodrome in the stalls, and I just happened, very unprofessionally, because you shouldn't be checking your phone during rehearsals.
None of us ever do that, James.
None of us ever do that.
While we're working.
I checked my Twitter. And
did you see that James Orange
Casting is looking for ballet dancers for the London production of American in Paris. Now, obviously, I'd already heard the buzz from New York about Leanne Cope and Robbie Fairchild and all these ballet dancers doing this show. And I'd always loved musical theatre. Yeah, always wanted to do it.
It's why you didn't go to White Lodge.
It's why I didn't go to White Lodge. But And I'd always wanted to play Mr. Mistopheles and Cats, and I'd always, wanted to do shows, but it never felt like the right time or the right thing, because I can sing, I can hold a tune, but I'm not a singer. And so it had to be the right one where I would be like, oh, my talents are really right for this kind of thing. And so that kind of advert came up, and I remember saying to one of my friends, oh, you should go for that. You should go up for it. She wasn't in BRB, she'd left. And I said, you should give that a go. And she said, well, if I do it, you need to do it. And so I went along, and they were preliminary auditions at the time. We didn't even know it was going to happen. And I went along, again, not really thinking what life would be like if I got it. I just was like, I want to see if I can.
Yeah. Because they looked for ballet dancers before they even looked at MT performers.
Because they wanted the right sort of level of...
Yeah, they wanted that classical aesthetic in musical theatre.
Yeah.
It's Chris Wheeldon,
Yeah, all
there's
of that.
a look about this show.
Yeah. And and there was partnering, and there was all that stuff. It's... So yeah, they started really early, beginning of 2016.
Yeah.
And I only did 3 auditions, I think. I went back 3 times.
Yeah.
And yeah, I sang, and then all the Americans came in. And by the end, I remember the last audition, it was kind of like everybody knew each other.
Yeah.
Because they'd whittled it down to a group of people of like, oh, from Birmingham, from Royal, from ENB, from Scottish, from Northern, like they'd kind of got...
Is this all in with the MT lot as well?
No, the classical people were always separate. We were kept very separate.
Separate pen.
Yes, exactly. And then, of course, they had to start early because they needed to find understudies and swings and all
there
of that
stuff.
stuff.
So many swings on that show.
So there were 12 swings on that show.
Because they're musical theatre and classical crossovers.
Yeah.
Very, very sought after artists to swing that show, I think.
Oh, yeah. They were the hardest working, most talented bunch out of all of us. So
you got that job?
I got that gig, yeah. And I remember, I remember being at the Hippodrome one time and just getting this phone call from James Orange Casting saying, like, are you still available and would you be interested? And I was like, yeah.
Let me think about this for a second. Yes.
Let me think about it. So I went to talk to David Bintley about it, and he said, right, take 12 months. Go off. Go fly the nest.
Oh.
Yeah.
And how amazing is that?
Yes.
I will always say that for him. We didn't always see eye to eye. And I'm not going to say that he was perfect in many ways, but he was so good to me. I'm so grateful for that year, because it's in our business, you don't get loyalty like that a lot of the time. When people go, okay, you go off and do that, and I will keep your job for you if you choose to come back. And he said to me, before I went away, he said, this will change you. You will be very different when you get back. So if you choose to come back, your job is here for you. So
that's amazing.
That's lovely.
It was really lovely.
That's very good.
Yeah.
And so, I did it it was a year. We didn't run for a year. We ran for 10 months. But
I saw it twice.
Right.
Yes.
Yeah, and he used to play for us for our ballet classes.
I did. I did a few of the onstage classes.
Did you?
James was the only person to turn up. No, because they had do you have a class for warm-up of an evening?
We used to do a half-hour ballet warm-up every day.
But there was a ballet class on in the afternoon, a full class, which James always attended.
I did.
Me, you, James, Raymond, Chine, Emma Harris. That was it.
No, there were a few others.
That's
who
a
used
lie.
To
There were a
come,
couple.
But I guess because I was on sabbatical and I had the option of going back to a ballet company.
Yes.
I was like, I need to keep it up. I can't just go back to Birmingham.
Yeah. A slight aside, because obviously you used to go and do the open classes as well while you were in London.
Dance work.
James is one of these dancers. I'm just going to blow you.
James used to be one of these dancers.
I'm going to toot your horn for you. Because you used to see James in class so not blasé, but just able to pick the exercises up without even looking at them and just do them so fiercely. I used to look at your footwork and be wowed by it. And then in the centre, he'll just beat everything like it's nothing. Like everything.
I Love to be.
And I just used to blow my mind that you just did it like it was water off a duck's back. And it was, and you know, amazing training and you're a professional dancer in the company. But against some of the open class dancers that are struggling freelancers, just showed them right up.
Oh, no.
Because you used to see Robbie in class and Ashley Day and Leanne, and
but
during that time it was
as well. I just think those open classes are amazing. Danny Crosley, who was an idol of mine in musical theatre.
Yes,
you know, I saw him in Fosse when I was about 14, and he was just incredible. And he still turns up to ballet classes
every day.
Dance work.
I think he's 44, 45 now, and he's still doing class.
Because, you know, there's always that argument, isn't it, of like, well, ballet is the basis of all forms of dance. Now, I'm not sure that is true. I'm sure there's lots of different sides of the argument. But if you are a technical dancer, you have to still go to class, whether that be jazz class or whatever. It doesn't have to be ballet. But there's lots of people who just think, oh, I'm just going to go to the gym. You know, tennis players play tennis if they want to get good at it.
Absolutely.
It's the same as a pianist though, isn't it? You know, you're not just going to go in there and play a concerto or play, you know, or play a reduction beautifully. You've got to put the legwork in constantly. It doesn't matter how long you've been playing. You've got to, you know, do your technicality things, your scales and things like that. Stop looking at me, Akiko, because I haven't done this for a long time.
I was going to ask, when's the last time you practiced scales?
Anyway, moving on, back to James.
Yeah, but it's so true. It's the same thing. You know, you can't just sit on the sofa waggling your fingers, hoping.
I tried that. It doesn't work.
You know, you can't watch a YouTube tutorial about how to play the piano and then turn up and hope it's going to happen. So
you did 10 months on American in Paris.
10 months on American in
Paris. And loved it, I presume. Did you do any Royal Varieties or anything like that?
We did a Royal Variety before we opened.
Oh yes.
To kind of preview it. And then we started rehearsals in January. We started previews. We did 3 weeks of previews in March. Opened at the end of March, I think. And then, we closed the following January. I mean, I'm one of these people that sort of, I do my best not to look back on things with rose-tinted glasses. I try and remember them just how they were.
Yeah.
Honestly, I still don't think I've recovered from American in Paris. Like
the workload.
We were knackered.
Yes. Yeah. I'm sure the swings are always on.
The swings were always on because the ensemble were always injured.
It's a tough gig. It's a tough gig.
And 8 shows a week of it, you know, and then right at the end, there was that 16-minute ballet that was full out. And we were moving all that scenery and singing and doing a tap number. And it was hard. It was hard. But so rewarding. I made friends on that show that I'm still really close to, that I think will be in my life forever. Hopefully, you know who you are.
Such a love. They all listen to this.
Do they?
Yeah, they told us.
Okay. Okay. Well, there were others that weren't so fond of me as well, but I will brush past that.
They were a very small minority group.
Yes. So I did.
It's a generally fond memories.
I did love it. Yeah, and actually, when that closed on January 4th, I think it was, 2018, I left the Dominion and I said goodbye to Chris Wheeldon and all of that. And we had a little closing night bash. And to me, that was like my last show. That was when I really stopped. I mean, I know I went back to Birmingham, but I just never managed to settle.
Right.
Because I had changed. David Binton was right. Life had changed. And I'd seen something else.
Yeah.
And I wasn't sure what I wanted to do. I left American in Paris with an agent.
Yeah. I think I remember having a chat with you. Because you said you wanted to do more shows.
Yeah.
And I just said, look, if you've got a salary job as a dancer, freelancing in musical theatre without a good agent is tough. And having a career in a ballet company going into musicals is not going to cut a lot of ice.
Yeah.
You're in the room with everyone else that's come from jazz colleges who are amazing singers.
Well,
so you think it's a step up, you know, being at a ballet school and a huge prestigious company without a good agent. Yeah.
It's not. And I did get a good agent, but you know, the things that I was up for were ballet things.
Right.
And because I am a ballet dancer, that is what I am. And I think lots of people tried to transition after that. And what really opened my eyes, opened up my eyes to in American in Paris was there were these guys and these gals with incredible voices who'd been in the industry for a really long time. They knew what they were doing. They knew how to pace themselves through 8 shows a week. It's not for sissies, musical theatre people. You've got to have drive and discipline.
Yeah.
And they could do it so much better than I could. And I was like, well, I'm a ballet dancer and I'm good at that.
Yeah.
So I did want to do other shows. I wasn't sure what kind of shows I wanted to do. And then I remember going to the Opera House to see a stage rehearsal of Myling.
Yeah.
And I sat watching it and I was like, this is my language. This is what I do.
Yeah.
And there's so many other people who do musical theatre a lot better than I do.
Yeah.
So I'm going to go back and kind of finish off my thing.
Yes. Yes. And in many ways, what you maybe lacked in musical theatre, you made up for in your ballet. Whereas a lot of musical theatre artists look at ballet dancers and think, that is where I really wanted to be when I was little.
Yeah,
but I sort of...
you know what's really funny about all of that is I think there's this horrible stigma that people in musical theatre were like failed ballet dancers. Because I do remember, and this is awful, because it's quite an old school way of thinking of like, if you were not going to be a ballet dancer, then your teachers would say, but you could always do musical theatre.
Yeah.
And I hate that.
Yeah.
I'm like, you do know that musical theatre is actually crazily hard.
Yeah.
You have to act, sing and dance and do it 8 times a week.
Yeah.
You know,
Like I say, as a ballet dancer, you're never going to do the same production week in, week out, 8 shows a week for 10 months solid without a break.
No.
It's a very, very different hard. You know, at most you might do 10 weeks of Nutcracker, which is going to kill you.
But then you get a 3-week paid holiday afterwards. Yeah. So, you know, it's it's a different bag. And it kind of, I think a lot of the ballet people were quite naive. Not naive, that's the wrong word, green.
Yes.
When we went into American in Paris and we
Yes.
kind of, you know, when we were doing previews, we were doing the show at night, then we'd be in all day and they were tweaking it. And we were just like, what is this? You know, we're doing this show in the night. Why are we rehearsing during the day? You know, it was very different. It's, and that preview period, they're perfecting something because when opening night happens, it's locked in.
It is. Yes, absolutely.
But it was, looking back on it now, there were really tough times. But we got through it as a company and I loved it. And actually, this sounds very selfish. I'm glad it closed when it did.
Right.
Obviously, I wish it had run forever and more people had seen it. But from a very, very selfish point of view, that was our thing and only we had it.
You can follow the podcast team by visiting the social media channels. Search for Ballet Piano Podcast on Instagram, Facebook and Twitter for up-to-date information and content about the podcast.
How was that then going back to BRB?
Awful. I'm not going to lie to you. So that's dramatic. It was not awful. I remember walking back into the first rehearsal and just being like, nothing's changed.
Yeah.
And I'm back here and having no direction, being like, okay, you know, I've chosen to come back and I must have come back for a reason. I just don't really know what that reason is.
And I know from playing from classical ballet companies and playing for musical theatre companies like On the Town and American in Paris, the vibe is different.
Very, you know.
In between exercises and in the rehearsal room and...
Even as a performer, you know.
Yeah, absolutely. The vibe is different. So yeah, you got back there and it was just like, oh, same old.
I got back that, you know what? It wasn't that it was same old. It was the same bubble. I think in a ballet company, you're with each other all the time for 10 years.
Yeah.
You know, some people go through the whole of school together and then they join a company. They've known each other for 20 years. And it's just kind of, it becomes very insular. And I then decided, I was like, okay, something needs to change. I'm not sure what that is. So how lucky was I that I could go back to Birmingham to work that out, really?
Yes.
And actually, I met you, Chris, at the Royal Ballet School in 2018.
Yes.
At the summer intensives. And that was the thing that changed it for me.
Oh, yeah.
Samira Saidi called me and said, would you like to come and do 2 weeks of teaching at the summer intensive? And I got there and it was all new to me. Obviously, Floral Street, the upper school. And I just loved it. I was like, okay. And I was working with Sarah Wheeldon,
Because we were doing the Rhapsody in Blue, weren't we? A section. I can't remember which variations
Ashton's
it was.
Rhapsody, it was that's the one. Yeah.
I remember I practiced for that. Just putting it out there.
Good, thank you. And it paid off. It was wonderful. Yeah, we did that and we taught that together, and I was teaching ballet class, and just sort of the gratification I got back from those students, I was like, this is what I want to do.
Yeah.
And, other people were also teaching at that summer intensive, and they were like, you should do this. You've got an eye for this.
Yeah.
So to hear other people saying it was quite nice, not just the people from Birmingham.
Yeah.
So,
and if you knew that you were done with dancing, maybe, and something else has grabbed you.
Yeah, which is very rare. Not many people get that, really.
It's an opportunity, I suppose, not to be missed.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
And then I went back to Birmingham for another year after that. And during that time, I did as much teaching as I could. I went to different colleges and different schools and did a whole load of stuff. Then went back to the Royal Ballet School the year after. And I remember David Bintley had just left.
Oh, yeah.
And thinking, okay, this is cool. This is kind of exciting. There's going to be a change of director at Birmingham. And there was kind of a buzz about it. And I thought, great, this might give me a new lease of life.
Yeah.
And then once that had died down, I kind of sat and thought about it, and I was like, I've done everything I wanted to do.
I was going to say, you're not looking back and thinking there's nothing I wish I'd have done.
No, not any. Of course, there's always going to be a ballet that you didn't do.
Yeah.
There's always going to be a role that you're like, oh, I would have been quite good in that.
Yeah.
Or like I would have really enjoyed it.
Yeah.
Of course, and that happens to everybody, but there's not 1 ounce of me. I miss performing. Of course, if you're a performer, you're always going to miss that. I don't miss my sort of career being dictated by somebody else.
It's in the life of a director. Your life is in their hands.
Yeah.
Your career is up to them.
Of course it is. And that's the way it has to happen. It happens that way in an office. There's always a director, there's always a CEO, there's always a manager. There has to be that chain. But I remember thinking, I don't want to do that anymore. And with a new director coming in, everybody would have to prove themselves all over again. And that's kind of make or break. I was like, well, I'm not sure I've got the energy to or the want to want to do that. And I'm quite pragmatic about sort of, okay, if my heart's not in this anymore, somebody else's will be.
Yeah.
And I should step aside for somebody who really does want to be doing this and is not just kind of going with the flow, hoping it's all going to get better. And so after I'd done the second year at Royal Ballet School, literally on the last day, this advert popped up saying Scottish Ballet are looking for a rehearsal assistant. And it kind of it listed all the key attributes. And I spoke to Sarah Wheeldon about it, and she was like, you should go for that. I think you've got some of those qualities. And I was like, I've never taught a company class before. I've never actually done this before. Yeah. And she was like, but what have you got to lose? You've still got your job in Birmingham.
Yeah.
Just go and give it a go. So I sent my CV in.
This was 2019.
2019.
Last year.
I sent my CV in, and then they said, right, can you come up and teach company class? And I remember staying in the hotel the night before, and I think I slept for about half an hour.
Oh my God.
I know exactly what you mean. Going
yeah.
into that company environment when you have never done it. And I know teachers that work at EMB and their first, you know, when they first teach a class,
it's scary.
It is scary. And the first time you play for a company class.
Oh, absolutely. I'm sure.
It is nerve-wracking.
Yeah. Because you just don't know what you're going to get. You don't know how people are going to respond to you.
Yeah.
I am glad that, you know, I walked into a company where no one really knew me.
Yeah.
That made it easier. I think I would have found it hard to teach a company class where everyone was like, all right, go on then.
Yeah. Yeah.
What have you got? So
this was your audition?
It was my audition, yeah.
Yeah.
It was 10 o'clock on a Monday morning.
Yeah.
And, you know, it was a general. There were boys and girls. Actually, the music was the thing that was stressing me out the most.
Yeah.
Because, you know, you never know what kind of pianist you're going to get.
Yeah.
I didn't know how specific I was going to have to be. Can I have this on a 3/4? Yes. Can I have this on a that?
Can I have the vot with an accent on the second beat, please?
Absolutely. And one thing, actually, one of the dancers at Scottish Ballet has pointed out to me is that I do sometimes, when I'm explaining an exercise, I try to be so thorough, but in doing so, I add a lot of words in. So instead of just being 1, a 2, a 3, a 4, I'll give you Andy 1E, Andy 2E, Andy 3E. Because I just want everyone to know that this is the musicality I want.
Yeah.
So we're all going to be the same.
Yeah.
So I make it sound more complicated than it is. And I remember thinking, what am I going to do if I get there and the pianist just either doesn't get what it is that I want or plays really weird tempos. And then I turned up and Brian started playing, and he's just the most incredible pianist. I know he's going to be on this at some point.
And you assume that you go and teach a company class that all the pianists are going to be able to cope.
Yeah.
You just assume, and you know, we've all played for companies, the three of us. So
it's not always the way, is it?
Is it not?
Yeah.
Well, hopefully it is, but you're always going to, every now and then you're going to get it where it doesn't quite work.
Always, you know, and as a teacher as well, you set an exercise and it doesn't always work the way that you want it to. And there's nothing worse, really. I think I actually view it that there's two of you teaching. So I'm setting the exercises, but you're providing the accompaniment, right? So you're giving them that beautiful music to dance to, and then I kind of step back and you have the floor. But there's nothing worse than the teacher having to stop the pianist and say, oh, actually, can we have this? Because I kind of feel like it really breaks the flow. And almost...
And who's not done their job properly if the exercise has to stop? Is it the teacher or the pianist?
Well, exactly. The teacher.
It's, you know, it's a working, you know.
Of course, it's a working relationship. It's a two-way thing.
It's the worst thing that you have to have a discussion during the class about one exercise between the pianist and the teacher.
It ruins everything. And then you can almost feel the dancers, be it company or students, looking at you both as if to go, why can't you two just get it right? What's wrong with you? No, come on, we're ready to move. Just let us do our job.
And we've mentioned all these horror stories on previous episodes of the podcast. There are so many times where it hasn't gone right. And it's just the way it is. It just makes for a funny story.
Well, very recently, I was asked to play for Fouettes by somebody who will remain nameless. And this person said, you know, it's very easy. It's just down, up, down, up. So
look at his face.
I wish I had taken a photograph of
James's face. Yeah. Okay.
So I asked the teacher to come over, and usually I will not ask. I will just go with whatever somebody marks. And I said, I'm really sorry. You almost marched quite a quick waltz. Are you sure you don't want, you know, a coda, Fouette coda? So I just sang the Swan Lake. Dun, 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 dun. Of course, that's exactly what I want. Down, up, down, up.
So I'm guessing she was meaning that they were all doing double fouettes, like down, double pirouette, down, 1, 2.
I'm not really sure because
she just didn't really know.
She just didn't really know what she wanted.
And
it just made for a little bit of a sort of cringy moment. And then, of course, you go into it, you're either going to play it too slow or too quick because you've got 8 different dances in front of you with 8 different fouette speeds. So you just play a medium tempo, which is right for nobody. Because then at least nobody's happy.
Exactly.
Not showing favoritism.
That's the thing about like in marking, you know, it's not only just to give an indication to the pianist, but also dancer would know where the accent will be or what the music are going to sound. So it's not just only helping us, but helping the dancers dance, I think.
Absolutely. Giving the feeling and the right intention for the exercise.
So your audition was just that one class?
So I taught a ballet class, and then they said, we're going to give you 6 dancers, and can you just teach them a bit of rep? And I was like, oh, yeah, okay. So they kind of gave me 3 girls, 3 boys. And I had an hour so that they could kind of see that I could relay information and that I could be specific enough.
Is it the rep that you already knew? Or?
It was, pre-prepared rep. Looking back on it now, I taught Balanchine Symphony in C, like a section from that, and that is not in Scottish Ballet's rep. So really, I should have done a little bit more research on that. But it was fun for the dancers.
I mean, I presume they were just wanting to help you out. Because they were just all lovely people.
Yeah, they're a really nice group of people.
And you're going to get something different from the dancers of doing a bit of Balanchine rep that they don't do day in, day out. Exactly. Season in, season out.
Exactly. And then I did have a short interview as well after that.
Okay.
And then, like 3 days later, they just called and said, I would like to offer you the job. And again, it's exactly the same thing as the Elmhurst thing, as taking the American in Paris job. In your gut, I think you just know this is the right thing.
Right.
Yeah.
You know, and whether I go back to dancing at any point, I'm not saying I will, but, you know, right now, this is what I needed to be doing, and this was the right kind of adventure to be going
but you've
on.
got point shoes broken in just right.
Just in case my makeup box is still
the grease paint's
fully
ready.
stocked. Yeah.
So you've been at Scottish Ballet now since
November the 4th, 2019.
It's just not even a year yet.
It's a year next week.
Wow.
And like, I've only done one production.
Well, that's not your fault.
No, that's not my fault. I joined and they were doing a new, Chris Hampson's new production of The Snow Queen. And of course, I was in rehearsals for about 2-3 weeks and they were kind of doing full run. So I was trying to learn the ballet. And then we opened in Edinburgh and I was sort of sitting there with a notepad and pen going, right, okay, let's try and, work out how this happens. And then we went on tour for a bit. And then I was setting David Dawson's Swan Lake and David Dawson came and he came into the office on the first day and he was like, what's kind of, the health sort of thing here, set up.
Was that this year?
Yeah, this was sort of like February, end of February. And he had about 7 different bottles of hand sanitizer and he was going, because, I don't want to get coronavirus. And I hadn't even heard about coronavirus. I was like, what are you talking about? And he was just obsessed with it. And then sure enough, 2 weeks after that, we heard these rumors of, so that's all I've kind of done. And then after that, I've just been teaching on Zoom. And the dancers are now obviously back in the studio. And we've got our masks on and it's COVID safe.
Yes.
How did you cope with Zoom teaching? Because we did a lot of Zoom playing for months.
Well, how did you find it first?
Horrible.
And then, yes.
Bloody awful.
There
I'm
you
going to
go.
say, 'cause that's the most swearing I can do without using the beat button.
Well, we just have to play eyes closed.
Mm.
Because if you look at the dancers,
just hope for the best.
Yeah.
So
if you've got... Sorry, no, after you.
Were you at home
Yeah.
doing it and then you were following the teacher and then there's that like 2-second delay?
Yeah.
Okay, so I haven't had it that bad. We were really lucky in that Brian would be at one end of the room and I would have a bar.
So you were both in the same room.
Okay,
that's helpful.
Right, so we were at home, Kika and I were in our house, and then the teacher would be in their house, and then we had students from our school dotted, so we had American group, Europe group, and East of the World group.
Right.
The time zones.
It was
horrible.
It was really hard.
So you just had to try and just keep your own tempo.
Just keep it going and hope for the best.
The jump is the worst.
Yeah. And if the teacher talks over the exercise or claps and clicks, they steal the audio.
Of course.
So the dancers don't hear your music. So they can't correct it while the music is playing, which is tough. You know, in the studio you can just do whatever
so at
you
least
like.
you could have shouted at the screen maybe over Brian playing.
Yeah,
that would have
you could
still
do
worked
that.
for your dancers on Zoom.
Yeah, absolutely. That was all good. But I know other companies had the same sort of setup, and it was testing, shall we say? Yeah, definitely. It wasn't. Zoom has been amazing, hasn't it, for so many people to work from home, and I think loads of companies and businesses have realised that Zoom can really work. It doesn't work for us.
No.
Unfortunately,
it's a very good workaround for the short term to enable training or classes to continue.
Absolutely.
In the short term, for people to stay, you're always going to lose something, aren't you, with being at home and dancing on a rug. But just to be able to do even a basic part, it was good for the short term to get us through the pandemic. But after that, you can't continue. It doesn't work.
No. And the dancers couldn't work properly.
No space and no big jumps and
it's
banging on your neighbours below and all the rest.
Lucky neighbours.
Of course, we struggled with that in Scottish because all the flats in Glasgow, especially in the south side, are like tenement buildings.
Yeah.
So obviously, creaky wooden floorboards and really uneven. So by the time you got to Allegro, there was just no chance really. But I do think ballet companies were amazing. They sent, I know Royal and BRB did the same in that they sent Harlequin flooring to the dancers and a ballet bar, and they tried to do everything they possibly could.
Yeah.
Anyway, we're out the other side now, and we're back in the studio.
Yeah. So what's next for James Barton?
I'm releasing a new album of my greatest hits. What is next for James Barton?
Well, you're happy at Scottish. You're now at Scottish.
Well, and people say, how have you found it? How's the job been? And I'm like, I haven't been able to do it. I was only kind of just finding my feet.
You're living in a new place.
Living in a new place where I haven't been able to make any friends, haven't been able to explore. So it's been quite difficult. not to sound like, oh, poor me, but, you know, it has been tricky. So I'm just got to keep going, haven't you? At the moment, and wait to see where we end up in 6 months to a year's time, and hope that I can do this job properly and that I learn to really love it. But you know what? I've learned so much in this year. Even just about people management is hard. You know?
Yes.
Managing.
When I look back on being a dancer now, you know, you would go to management with all your problems because management, apparently, you know, they're therapists, they're teachers, they're your parents.
Dream makers, they're
exactly.
everything.
And it's always their fault, you know.
Yes.
They're your best friend, but also your worst enemy.
Yeah.
So again, I think I went into this job thinking I want to help people be the best that they can be at their job, and you know, use my eye and the kind of knowledge that I think I have to help these dancers. But really 60% of it is sorting out people's problems or just listening. So I've learned a lot, you know, just mostly about people management.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
Just before we finish, got a couple of quickies for you.
All right.
What is your absolute career highlight?
Oh, that's really hard. You know what? Opening night of American in Paris.
Okay.
I had my two best mates came, Billy and Flick. They sat on the second
Flick
row.
Swan?
Flick Swan and Billy Bracewell came, and we had a good old bougie party afterwards. And we were all like press night thin, you know, where you've been doing like 3 weeks of
Oh my
previews.
God, I know what press night thin is.
And you've just been working so hard and you don't have time to eat. So we were, you know, when I look back on the pictures, not that I'm condoning this, it's not a good thing, but we've just been working really hard. And I you know, that was so fun. That was the real career highlight, I think.
Okay. What advice would you give your 18-year-old self? You've just set foot in the company.
And I did this actually, to be fair. So I would give myself the same advice. Just watch and listen. I think lots of people come into a company and they think they know it all by the time they're 21. You really don't.
Yeah.
Like, and that's okay. You know enough that you need to know by the time you're 21. But there's people who've been doing it a lot longer and they can teach you a lot of stuff. So just sit back and just watch.
Brilliant. Okay, what did you have for breakfast this morning?
I didn't have anything.
I know you're going to say that.
I finished work at 9 o'clock last night, and then I sort of woke up.
It's quite a dancer's thing, isn't it?
Yeah, sorry.
No, that's fine. That's your answer.
We had a fry up.
Good for you. So you should.
If you won the lottery tomorrow, what's the first thing you're doing?
I would buy a nice little pad in London somewhere and take a year out. Take a year out. And I would give some cash to my mates and to my family and make sure they were all right. But after I bought my swanky London pad.
Yes.
And I'd have a really nice time. Thank you.
You might as well.
Should I also say like, and I'd give money to charity?
No one said that yet, so no.
Okay, that's all right.
So we are becoming our best friend.
Yeah, exactly.
We're your bezzes.
Yeah.
Oh, anyway, James, thank you so much.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you, James.
Thank you.